Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of this Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Analysis podcast. I'm Nökkvi from Birds of Play, and I'm once again joined by Peter from Birds of Play
Hi.
and the one and only Alleyway Jack,
Hello.
who is closer than ever before to 10,000 subscribers. So please help him get there. So, today we are going to be talking about chapter 12 and 13 of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and we're actually going to be talking about it for the second time because the original recording got corrupted. So things might get a little bit crazy. So that's what you are in for. But just to help you find your footing a little bit, I think I'm going to pass the reins on to Alleyway Jack, who can sort of get us caught up with where we are.
Sure thing. Thank you, Nogvi. So where we left off in the previous episode, which was episode 6 of this Final Fantasy VII discussion, we had gone through the Nibelheim segment in a very interesting dungeon crawl as Kate Sith, which was highly well received by us. We've then reacquainted with Sid Highwind at the Tiny Bronco, taken off, flying over the skies of Nibelheim with Vincent Valentine on board now this time, and the Tiny Bronco has decided to give out and crash land into the water. So almost a facsimile of what happened in the original game. However, while in the original game we were shot down by Shinra troops, this time the Tiny Bronco just gave out. So now it's a form of water transport. And that's pretty much where we pick up at the beginning of this chapter, in chapter 12, and we are on our way back to the Gold Saucer to find Dio in order to obtain the keystone.
Yes, that's exactly right. So, what did you think of this change of how the Tiny Bronco crashes? Any ideas? Any thoughts?
I think I think it's just running. There's this thread running throughout the game that we've seen so far, which is basically we're arriving at the same conclusions, though by different means. And some of them have been done to quite good effect. Some of them have been done quite hammily. But with this one, I was amenable to it. I thought it was fine. The way that they built out the story in this instance, there was no real need for Shinra troops to be in Nibelheim or Rufus to be present or anything like that. So it is a step change from Rocket Town, which I think some people were kind of a bit upset that we hadn't seen Rocket Town at this point. We hadn't been introduced to Sid at Rocket Town, for example. But how it's been packaged in this new story, I thought it was fine. And it always felt like the Tiny Bronco was going to end up as water transport, right? More than anything else. So it was kind of how they brought us to that point. And I was fine with it.
So we reached the same conclusion.
Yeah.
But the different means also can lead to some different characterizations. So, for example, with Sid, we have this expert mechanic who is confident that he is able to bring all these people over in the plane, even though they have sort of foreshadowed that this plane can't handle that many people.
Yeah.
But it sort of feels like an attack on his professionalism that they can't make the journey all the way to the Gold Saucer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I think it speaks to his sort of stubbornness. I mean, obviously he has a degree of expertise, but I think what they're playing up to there is the fact that he is a very kind of stubborn individual as well.
And maybe because of the chaos materia, Vincent has a lot more mass. So he couldn't have foreseen how massive he is because he has all these beasts inside of him.
Yeah, there was a part of me, and again, just stupid shower thoughts after you've played that segment. I was like, well, Vincent obviously has this sort of hovering, flying thing he can do. Couldn't he just kind of hover in the cabin and not really have his mass factor in?
But isn't the plane an isolated system? It's the same as when you jump inside of a lorry. Like, does the lorry get lighter? No, because it's a physics thing, right?
Physics is not my strong point, evidently.
Yeah, me neither. So I'm gonna stop talking.
So if physics break your brain a little bit, just go back to that thought about Alleyway Jack in the shower and make sure to subscribe. But yeah, so once we reach Costa del Sol, we have this sort of the last area in the game, which is the open ocean. which they sort of try to sell us on with this pirate quest, this amazing pirate quest, which I would say isn't maybe that amazing. And I was sort of hard pressed to figure out how that related to the original game. It's sort of easier to relate it to the legacy of pirates in other Final Fantasy games, because pirates have been a part of Final Fantasy games in one form or another throughout the series. But I don't remember them in the original Final Fantasy VII.
No, and it's very much the same with Queen's Blood as well. It's like the whole mythos of Queen's Blood felt kind of weird, you know. As we've established, I sort of love the game. I love the mini game and stuff, but the actual narrative arc, the setting and the purpose and the lore of Queen's Blood, like Queen being like a monarchy and stuff, and there's no real, I can't think of many monarchies in the Final Fantasy VII world. So yeah, it felt a bit disjointed, and the same with the pirates. It felt a bit disjointed in terms of the setting and things like that.
But yeah, of course, this is also our opportunity to finish the Queen's Blood questline, which I, of course, did. And it's so strange because Queen's Blood seems to be sort of the biggest part of the game where they allow themselves to use horror elements. Maybe partly because it is so sort of nonsensical in a way as well. We have the creator of Queen's Blood coming back from the dead, which is not explained within the lore of Queen's Blood itself, I feel. And then we reach these ruins in Gongaga, which was sort of painful for me because I had to navigate
it was a hassle
the Gongaga area.
Yeah, it was a hassle to find that Queen's Blood kind of questline bit in the ruins of the castle, whatever it was.
Yeah, and sort of it makes me wonder also what those ruins were. Were those old Cetra ruins? Is that the idea? I imagine it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we also, of course, one interesting tidbit is that we get to play Vincent. We get to play against Vincent, and then Vincent also arrives during the final confrontation in Queen's Blood. And this is sort of a way to incorporate him into the story a bit more, at least according to Toriyama, the co-director of the game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think what was hilarious about this, and again, as you mentioned, Nokve, at the beginning, we sort of re-recorded, and we've recorded this previously, so we've already had this discussion in some ways. One thing I remember from that previous discussion was something quite pertinent you pointed out, which was Vincent is like a Queen's Blood aficionado champ, and yet apparently he's been in this coffin for however long. So you were making the point of, has he been sneaking out at night and playing Queen's Blood or something like?
Yeah. So he is able to play Queen's Blood at a high level, but another factor is that once we are sort of riding in the tiny Bronco, they talk about Dio, and Vincent, he knows Dio, and he knows about his sort of old museum and now the gold saucer. So it seems like he hasn't been cut off from the world completely.
But in the context of Rebirth and the remake, like, we have no context for Vincent. We just found him in a coffin, and we're never told that he's tied to the mansion, or he's literally he has a staff ID, and like he seems to be just like a weird, creepy staff member of Shinra. So it doesn't seem that out of place for him to just get out of his coffin sometimes and play Pokemon somewhere.
Yeah, actually, him being in the coffin all the time would be more strange. Like in this sort of more realistic context where he isn't just sleeping, he is guarding the place, he's receiving a salary which he uses to buy Queen's Blood cards. Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of change for Vincent, the mysterious vampire. Man.
Yeah, and I don't know how much we discussed in the last episode about Vincent, or the one we lost, about how I'm really, and I think you, Jack, as well, are enjoying his characterization in this version, where he's sort of like a Luddite when it comes to technology, and he has got sort of old tech, and we're making fun of him a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you guys pointed out that we're kind of like post vampires being cool now as a sort of culture. So it's like he wouldn't have the same impact if they tried making him sort of the Advent Children era or the Dirge of Cerberus era Vincent, where it was just like everyone thought he was cool. Because we're sort of post that. It was like, okay, let's give him a bit of comedic edge there, and I think it really works. I think they've kind of nailed Vincent
Yeah.
in this iteration.
Yes. So, do we want to head over to the Gold Saucer?
Absolutely.
Yes, it's an amazing
Yeah.
place.
And crucially, you can just fast travel there now. They opened up full fast travel, which I enjoy as a lazy player.
Yes.
And not something that was a part of the original game at all.
Yeah, and of course, this is the part of the game where you can go to all these different places. You can visit under Junon again to play around with the dolphin a little bit more. We don't get any more sort of significant characterization for characters like Priscilla, which is a shame, I feel, because that's sort of an original game character that wasn't really fleshed out. And then in the larger Junon area, we can also meet the 7th Infantry again.
Yes.
Where we sort of discover that at least their captain is on to us, or maybe was on to us, saw through the charade, which was sort of refreshing because it takes away some of the silliness of that moment of being sort of, you're the captain now.
Yeah, and I think as we mentioned before, like that Junon segment, the whole thing with the 7th Infantry was like so well written and done, because we sort of, by the end, we sort of empathized with them. So I think I've mentioned before, but I was really glad that we got that side quest, because we were able to meet them again and have this sort of positive closure with them.
I think the whole Junon segment is probably one of my favorite parts of the game. Like the flow there is so good, and the visuals are so powerful.
Yeah,
I think
it was great. It was
Mhm.
great. But yeah, as you say, we can fast travel to the Gold Saucer now. As an aside, I only discovered this. I don't know how long this meme's been going around, right? But I only saw it, I think, yesterday or the day before. There's a meme going around about an angry person that was doing a playthrough of Final Fantasy VIII, and they were told, right at the beginning of that game, you're told to go to the Fire Cavern, and they ended up in Balam Town, because obviously the era that Final Fantasy VIII was released, there was no fast travel, there was no map markers that you would sort of run to, or any of those sort of beacons that you'd follow, these modern UI elements that we have in games. So yeah, as Peter says, I love the fact you can fast travel and you just have pinpoints on a map, like everything you can interact with. But yeah, I just, it's funny thinking about how that is a kind of comparatively modern thing for Final Fantasies, because actually back in the past you'd have to just navigate very manually to find these things, and it was
I remember a time in my life, and me and Peter, we both did this at least together. We were sort of reluctant to embrace fast travel sometimes. For example, in Fallout 3, I think we just
And Skyrim.
and
as
Skyrim,
well.
we won't fast travel. We're just gonna walk everywhere,
Yeah.
even though it took a huge amount of time. So
Yeah.
but
like, I don't know if we, again, it's a shame we lost the episode, but it's on the topic of this thing. It's one of the things that I thought wasn't, downfall is a strong word, but like in Final Fantasy 16, I really would have liked more of a Rebirth experience where you sort of Rebirth isn't completely seamless, but it does feel like you can sort of walk from one end to the other of the map. And I know there are sort of split differences on the fast travel system in 16, but it's a vast world that felt really small to me, just because I could fast travel from the start, and that was the only sort of mode of transport. And I would have liked to see the Rebirth sort of approach in 16. Maybe open up fast travel later, and maybe not have the whole navigation of the game done on a map like that. But we'll get to that in our series on. Okay.
Stay tuned. It's going to be amazing. But okay, so we reached the Gold Saucer and we are looking for the Keystone. And Dio has the Keystone, so we go and meet him, but he's all sort of beaten up by Root. So he's Dio is this big bulky dude who still lost to the relatively slim Turk, showing the sort of physical prowess. And he is willing to give us the Keystone if we fight for him in the contest for naming rights, as Don Corneo has challenged him.
Yeah, very bizarre situation and complete departure from anything that had to do with the original. But I personally liked it. I thought it was kind of funny. And as we mentioned in the last episode, it was sort of this leaning into the absurd that Final Fantasy, and particularly Final Fantasy VII, does pretty well. But yeah, so Don Corneo has sort of challenged Dio for like the rights of the Gold Saucer or something, and they are settling it with a duel.
Yeah. And this is also, of course, just a way to get Don Corneo back into the world of Final Fantasy VII, because we are expecting to see him again in the last installment. So it would be sort of weird to see him skip a game. And I actually like it, even though it borders on the too absurd for me. But I just like the fact that they are using established characters, because the characters they are introducing aren't all that fleshed out or interesting most of the time, at least.
Yeah.
Like I had the
I
hots
would've-
for Broden. Like I loved Broden.
I can tell that because you've mentioned him in most episodes.
Broden is my bro, bros.
But it was so too absurd. You mean to say that you didn't like seeing Don Corneo on the decks?
No, like the fact that we were getting an established character in that way was enough to sell me on the idea of this crazy contest.
I would have liked to see, like, if they're going to go this route, I would have liked to have seen the stakes in both directions. Like, what gives Don Corneo the right to do this, and why would Dio ever accept this challenge?
Yeah, I found
there are no sort of
I
stakes.
agree. I find, because again, I played through that episode, like that part of the chapter this morning, and as far as I can see, there's no context really for why that's occurred. Right, Don Corneo's sort of there.
Yeah.
And it feels like it could have been settled with just one line or something. Like, I can't let this is a matter of honor or something like that, even if it was just something simple as that.
My sort of headcanon was that sort of Dio and Don Corneo, not that Dio's a criminal, but he sort of deals with underground stuff as well. And in their sort of circle, like, these are the rules of engagement or something. Like,
you should be writing this game.
No, I should be writing this game because I have a better idea. No.
Oh, cool.
No. Like, one thing could have been that Don Corneo actually helped fund the establishment of the Gold Saucer. So he has some sort of.
What's interesting, right, is and I only noticed it this morning, and annoyingly, I don't know if it's the levels on my TV and my system or just the levels of the game, but while you are traversing in the tiny Bronco through the water to get to Costa del Sol, where you jump off, Kate Sith is talking to you about Dio, and and again, I can't quite catch what he's saying, even with the subtitle bit. He says it's like a rags to riches story, where Dio's been through this sort of up and down thing, ended up in the Gold Saucer and stuff. So they try and establish it.
Children, am I right?
There was some random man ringing the doorbell.
Oh. Well, Will was on a really good point, but never mind.
It's okay.
Yes. What was your amazing point?
It was the point that Kate Sith seemed to be establishing some context for who Dio was or where he came from while we're in the tiny Bronco traveling through the water. And he says it's like a rags to riches story or something. And I never quite caught it. So I think they do try and establish him a bit. And I think he is a bit of a shady figure as well. So I think if they'd just done a bit more than have it as this sort of short dialogue while in transit, give us a bit more Dio, it would have been cool.
Yeah. So
it's not out of the question that Dio and Don Corneo were running in the same circles at some point. So it
yes, but enough fan fiction. But okay, so before we actually get to the contest, there's a lot of stuff going on. We go to the hotel to rest up, and there Aerith is in the lobby writing lyrics to a song, very casually. So which will come to fruition a little bit later. And then as we sleep, we have a Zack scene, right?
Yes, we do.
Yes. So we go to Zack, and Elmira hands him a bowl and tells him to clean Cloud, and which would have been an amazing...
I wish we could have gotten a sort of six-pack rubbing.
There needed to be a use. We already had the L2R2 those buttons.
Yeah.
Massage.
So it's really work up a good lather.
I would have loved to actually just like to individually stroke his chest, like the right side, the left side, both. And would have been amazing.
Cloud sort of going.
Yeah, and we get these flashes to Cloud and the gold sausage sort of experiencing it as well.
I feel all tingly.
That would have been amazing.
Yes, but enough fan fiction.
But yeah, so and then he has a chat with Marlene, who warns him that Cloud must get better because he must save Aerith. Because wasn't it in remake where Aerith touches Marlene and sort of Marlene becomes sensitive to probably the whispers and the future. So she sort of has this image of Sephiroth killing Aerith. And Cloud and Zack, of course, just like, what you on about, girl? Oh, I don't remember his response.
Until she describes his long silver hair and then sort of
yes, he does take her seriously. And then we have Biggs setting off on his sort of suicide mission because Zack is actually on his way to meet Hojo, but he has to postpone that to chase after Biggs to save him. Yeah. And then we wake up in the real world, all hot from our sponge massage. And then we get to the date. And like we discussed last time in the last recording, I was aiming for Tifa and I got Red 13, which ended up being sort of interesting in its own way because on that date, Red 13 divulges the information that he and Aerith used to be able to see the future, which it's sort of a big lore dump in a way. So they shared that power, and that power is sort of dwindling. They're losing it, so he doesn't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think, and as we mentioned last time, it's kind of it's a weird place to have such a significant bit of lore because it's so optional. It's one of several instances you could have there. I suppose in defense of it, part of the replay value of the older Final Fantasy, like the original 7, 8, 9, so on, is because you can choose your party at different intervals. I used to do that a lot and do different playthroughs with different configurations of party members because of the different dialogue options. So yeah, I suppose there is that, but yeah, it would have been nice to have that kind of upfront in the story. For my part, I've played through it. I've played, well, this is my third official playthrough of this. So I think first time I got Tifa, which is the canonical one. Then I got
whoa.
Yeah.
Is it? I was going to say the Aerith one is canonical.
Controversial on purpose there. My second one was probably the funniest one for me, which is Vincent, Sid, and Kate Sith. So as I mentioned in the chapter select, you can actually, on subsequent playthroughs, you can just choose who your date's going to be. You don't need to try and manage the relationship system so much. And that's just really funny, seeing Sid and Vincent sitting really awkwardly in this cabin while Kate Sith is trying to be really optimistic and encouraging about the sights. And then, as we were saying a moment ago about Vincent kind of being a more humorous version of his goth self, he actually falls asleep in the cabin and starts snoring. So it's really funny how they've sort of U-turned on him being like really cold and cool and just made him sort of this sort of vampiric old man. And then, this morning, my playthrough, I got Yuffie. And Yuffie was an interesting one as well, actually, because you do get a bit of a lore dump. It's not as important necessarily as that Red 13 one, but she starts talking about a soldier that she once had a fight with. And this is referencing back to Crisis Core, where she met Zack. And she actually says she had a crush on this soldier guy, which is kind of funny because it's sort of building out this thing that we don't otherwise know about Yuffie at all. That she kind of had the hots for Zack a little bit. And then she very overtly says to Cloud that Tifa has a crush on him as well. So, Yuffie being Yuffie, the personality she has, she's being very forthright about these sorts of situations, which is funny.
One thing I sort of noticed about the Yuffie date was that as you go on the ferry, whatever it's called, the Ferris wheel thing, then she says, "Oh, this is just practice," which is sort of interesting because of her age. She's of course very young. Because in games like Final Fantasy X, you have these moments between Tidus and Riku, where you're actually able to express genuine interest in Riku. So there aren't many of them, but you're sort of, for example, in Guado Salam, you're able to express that you might be interested in Riku. So it's interesting that it didn't go that route in this game. You're not able to sort of genuinely romance Yuffie.
Yeah.
Good.
And actually, you could, so for the intimate ending of that date, she just gives you a peck on the cheek, and Cloud's sort of taken aback and like just very stoic. You can't tell what he's thinking, which is probably the safe option because, as you say, she's a teenage girl. So
yeah, and it's just for practice.
yeah.
And then for the Barrett date, I watched that as well. So he's talking about his wife, but then he goes on to tell Cloud that he needs to confess his feelings to the person he loves, if he has any feelings, and that Cloud shouldn't overthink it. At which point Cloud says something like, "Oh, like you do," and it was a nice contrast between Barrett and Cloud. Like Barrett being this guy who always just does what he's thinking, and Cloud sort of being a little bit more reserved, holding his cards close to his heart. But yeah, so I thought it was a nice sort of character piece for the both of them.
Yeah.
Nice.
I for one enjoyed my date with Aerith, the canonical choice. It was very nice, and sort of they seem to sort of know more overtly in this game that like Cloud and Tifa are probably going to end up together, but Aerith sort of seems to want to grab this moment anyway, and sort of invites him to sort of sit closer to her and rests her head on his shoulder and stuff, and sort of just enjoy the moment.
So in that sense, does it come, because I haven't seen that one yet, so does it come across as maybe more platonic or something like this, or?
I for one took it as like, they like each other on some level, but sort of both know that this probably will not end with them together, but they are there in this very beautiful, pretty moment, and sort of and allow themselves to just sort of feel close to each other. I thought it was quite nice, and it felt like the canonical choice to me. But maybe that's because I'm really biased. I don't know. But I'm gonna guess that like people who went on date with like Red 13 and stuff, and Yuffie for that matter, are probably in the single digits, like percentage-wise of game players. So it's interesting to hear like these sort of major lore points and character points being sort of explored in these dates, because I will never go on these dates.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but of these dates. Speaking of these dates, sorry,
Yes.
got lost in my cat there. So the Tifa date feels very romantic in a way. It ends with sort of Cloud grabbing her and embracing her. But also
that's not the way the Aerith date went. So I need to watch that.
The Aerith date was the first one I saw, even though I was in all my playthroughs. I've been aiming for Tifa, and somehow I mess it up, which is sort of a shame, because I would like for the game to sort of let you make meaningful decisions that influence this state later on. Like, do you know what I mean? Because even though I was aiming for Tifa, I somehow got Red 13. Like,
that's pretty weird, because I would think you would either get Aerith or Tifa. I think it's pretty biased towards those two.
I would think so.
But
I think as well, it's like we mentioned this, I think back in episode 2 when all of these mechanics became opened up to us. with the relationship system, or whatever it's called, I think it's quite hard probably to navigate that, because none of us would naturally be overtly, because I feel like your relationship would only stay neutral or go down if you were overtly mean to certain party members. So Red 13, he's quite a, inoffensive character. There's no reason we'd go out of our way to say anything negative or rude to him. So probably you notched him up to a positive relationship or something just by being friendly. So
one thing that Remake maybe did a little bit better than Rebirth is that it presents you not only with a choice of being nice or not nice to individual party members, it makes you choose between them. For example, in the sewer area, you either run up to Tifa or Aerith first.
Yeah.
And if you run up to Tifa first, then you should show preference for Tifa. I don't know if those mechanics are somewhere hidden beneath the surface in Rebirth, but at least it doesn't feel sort of conscious. So when you're running around town looking for the characters, I don't go out of my way to, I'm not going to speak to Aerith first. I'm going to look for Tifa. That sounds a bit too much, but yeah. So I would have liked to see you making maybe choices between party members just to get it right, so I don't have to sit with like a dog on a date. Yeah, but so do we want to say anything more about the ferry date?
I just thought it was very sweet.
It was very sweet. It was very
It was a
sweet.
very nice scene.
But once again, we did this last time as well. We are messing with the order of things because they don't go on the date until after the play.
Oh.
So we go to the play, and it's sort of digital, right?
Yeah.
We have this.
So, let me just get into it right away. This, I really enjoyed this sequence. This is a huge sequence. There's a dance number, and there's and all that stuff. And but conceptually, this makes no goddamn sense because every character, every audience member gets its own pair of VR goggles that sort of put you maybe in the actual play, but then it's Cloud and Aerith and Barrett and Red 13 are all sort of antagonists and protagonists in this play. And I don't know, it just did not sort of come together in my head. What the hell is happening for people sitting in the audience?
Maybe if this was more like augmented reality, it would have made sense. So you put on the visors and it sort of augments what you're seeing and hearing on the stage, but it's just fully VR, and you don't need this big auditorium for that, basically.
Yeah,
it was bizarre. I was wondering, are other people in the audience seeing themselves projected into these protagonistic roles, or are they just seeing Cloud, these random audience participants? Because that's how the original game is, right? The thing they've borrowed from is the fact it's audience participation, and it is Cloud fighting the dragon and the princess and stuff in the original Gold Saucer, right? So
on a shitty school play stage and little puppets and stuff, and this one is completely the opposite, high-tech, huge production. And it's a really well done sequence. So just I wasn't sure, when I sort of tried to sort of analyze it, so Cloud is sitting in the audience and he didn't notice that Aerith actually left and went onto the stage, but she's still, it was very confusing.
Yeah, it was wild. But overall, I think all of us kind of established last time we liked it. I think I really like these kind of quick time events. I love them in the Junon segment, the dance, the Honeybee Inn segment, and then again they've sort of redone it for these battle sequences in the play. One thing I didn't mention last time was actually originally Cloud's wearing this blue half cape and stuff in his hero guise, and I thought, just visually, I was like, are they making a nod to Final Fantasy Tactics, because he looked a bit like Ramza from Tactics, and I was like, that's cool. But then you guys made a very good point, which actually made this all the more interesting to me, which is actually they're sort of perhaps retelling these stories from the Sentra era and stuff like that, which actually is much more to do with the lore and the history of Final Fantasy VII, which becomes very pertinent in the next chapter that we're going to discuss in a moment. But so yeah, I thought it was really cool overall.
Yeah, they seem to be dressed in the same motif as in the Sentra flashbacks and holograms and stuff.
But one sort of So this is, of course, the play is basically the realization of the Loveless epic, which we have sort of heard about in Crisis Core, and of course there's the big Loveless sign back in Midgar, and it seems to be based on sort of history to some degree. So it was sort of interesting to get introduced to the city of Guardia, which sort of is very sort of the main motif of the city seems to be gears and clocks, and it also seems sort of mechanically advanced. So my first instinct was sort of, oh, this looks a bit like Samarkand in a way. But then I was digging around a little bit, and I had forgotten that Guardia is a city in Chrono Trigger, which of course is a very sort of time conscious game, going back and forth in time. So you have these gears, and that made me think of it as a bit of an Easter egg, which I thought was a bit of a shame, because this is such a great opportunity for lore, and to mix Easter eggs and lore can be a bit risky, I feel. Because once we reach the Temple of the Ancients in the next chapter, we also have these clock motifs, which sort of establishes a connection between this city of Guardia and the Temple of the Ancients, in a way, visually at least. So I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, I don't. But I think but I really agree with you. I think the aesthetic of it and sort of the way they've established that is really cool, because we've got a distinct sort of semantic or just visual. There is a visual style that the Cetra now have, that when we see it subsequently, we're like, okay, this is Cetra sort of thing. So I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of Easter eggs, in the fight sequence, Cloud does a little sort of Noctis style teleportation, which is kind of cool. I don't think it's any deeper than just a little nod.
I think like, I mean, just visual nods, things like that, I think are fine. If they were sort of really leaning into Chrono Trigger when trying to establish Guardia, that would be a bad decision.
Yeah.
It reminds me recently, sorry, I'm going off track here, but you know Tekken, right? Tekken has this mythos of the Mishimas and the Devil Gene and stuff like that. I mean, it's just a fighting game. They've established, as of Tekken 7, Akuma from Street Fighter as a canonical character in that Devil Gene mythology, because they just got him on loan or whatever, the license for him from Capcom. And I was just like, that's terrible. Like, why are you introducing Street Fighter characters into the lore of Tekken? It makes no sense. But anyway, so yeah.
I mean, the lore of Tekken is a dumpster fire, man. Like I enjoy it too.
Yeah. So hopefully they'll steer clear of that in Final Fantasy.
Yeah. And speaking of MJ Gallagher, who has written extensively on the relationship between Final Fantasy and myth, I noticed that Red 13, the character that he is playing in the play, is Garm or Garmur, which is a sort of mythological dog, wolf kind of thing in Norse mythology, sometimes conflated or thought of as being Fenrisulfur, or related to Cerberus or Cerberus in Greek mythology, sort of a guardian of the underworld, but is usually related to the end of the world. And the world is very much at risk of ending. So maybe that's a connection that MJ Gallagher can work with.
Good segue. Very natural.
Please share our video, MJ. Please.
I'm glad we got a reference to MJ in again.
Yeah.
I feel like, have we mentioned Final Fantasy VIII yet? I must have.
Yeah, we
I
did.
feel like the
We
running
talked about
thread
the
through this, we
navigation.
used to crowbar in a reference to MJ Gallagher and Final Fantasy VIII at some point.
In depth, preferably. But yeah, then at the end of this play, which is sort of fun and not very serious, when we are sort of fighting Barrett and Red 13, we have Barrett in the guise of Barbados actually say something meaningful or share a little bit of foreshadowing when he says, What awaits you at journey's end, I wonder? Will the goddess grant you her blessing, or will the flames of vengeance consume you? All shall be revealed, O puppet of fate, so dance while you still have time. And Cloud is, of course, very much in this sort of puppet state in a way, being controlled by Sephiroth. So this seems to have a deeper meaning than just something that is included in the play for no reason.
Yeah, and that's and I can't remember if you guys may have mentioned this in the last time, but it's funny. Well, it's interesting that there's this foreshadowing in this play, Loveless, which was written however long ago. Is there a sense of foreshadowing about these events that are now taking place with Cloud, or is it a coincidence, a literary, coincidence, whatever? So yeah, interesting.
So is history repeating itself? Did we have a Genova puppet in the past as well? And Cloud is now sort of retracing those steps in a way. But then once the sort of play ends, and we just discussed before that we don't really know what's going on, Aerith has this big song number, a song that she wrote the night before. And the
Gold Saucer has allowed her to just perform it.
Freestyling on Loveless with her own song.
Yeah. And she does an amazing job. But during the performance, we see the sort of flowers, and we see the live stream sort of running around the room, and we can sort of wonder what's really happening, because we also see Biggs, Jesse, and Wedge.
Yeah, and like, is what am I, as an audience member, what am I seeing? Again, because we have corpses. We have dead ghosts showing up, and Chadley is there, and there's a lot of live stream. And it's a very beautiful moment, but like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, and one interesting thing is that Chadley actually seems to notice the live stream running through the room, and he turns around, and that's when we get the scene of Biggs, Jesse, and Wedge. So what's going on? We don't know. Because we also have this idea of the digital world, which became very important in Dirge of Cerberus, where Hojo returns as this digital being that re-enters the physical world, which makes more sense in this version of Final Fantasy VII, where they have sort of, where they have sort of established the idea of virtual reality and this digital plane being very powerful. So it'll be interesting to see what the future holds.
Yeah, for sure. So as we've done this in reverse order, we then have the Ferris wheel that we've just discussed, and then it's the end of the date. And then do we go into the combat scenario in the Gold Saucer right after? Pretty much.
Yes.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yes.
There's an amazing rap, as we did mention last time. Long rap performance that just will not end. But
but it's nice to see Scots and Cots
again. I think we all liked it.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It was so ridiculous. I couldn't bring myself to hate it at all. I thought it was great. Seeing Don Corneo DJing, he's very adept at that. Perhaps he should have become a musician. And then we just fight through a series of kind of again, it's just a version of the Colosseum that we had in Remake, and this sort of updated version of the Battle Square. We fight through a bunch of bandits, then we fight through a bunch of Don Corneo designed like cactuars and tomberries and stuff. They have that little quiff that Don Corneo has, which again just absurd and hilarious. And then this is actually quite a laborious set of battles, because we go through like 3 or 4 tiers, because then we have the Turks, and then we have Rufus. So loads of battles.
Yeah, but crucially, like, the Turks bring out a couple of couches and a vending machine, like in a cutscene. like take a rest, which is
and this rest is taking place after Cait Sith has betrayed us.
Yes, yeah.
After he has gotten his hands on the keystone.
The time is of the essence.
Run away.
Yeah.
Our most trusted ally, Cait Sith, has shown his true colors, as we mentioned.
Yeah, but I mean, So for
Yeah.
my part, I don't know how you guys felt about it. I will never begrudge a Turks battle because I love seeing those guys on screen. I think the way they're written as characters, it's just really organic and it's really good. I did question the appearance of Rufus again. I felt that again, and I'm like, as you love Broden, as much as I love Rufus, I am a fanboy of Rufus, and I think a part of his original characterization that always struck me was how stoic and reserved he is, very cold. You know, he is quite a hands-on guy. Like in the original game, he will go on the high wind himself to find the promised land, so he is very hands-on. But a part of me felt that him reducing himself to being in a colosseum in the arena for a baying mob, it just felt he was cheapening himself because he's better than that.
Yeah,
it's a very public setting to do this. And,
yeah, I agree. And one sort of interesting thing about his appearance, sort of unrelated to that, more related to translation and the Japanese version. So he appears and he says that he's going to dispose of Cloud personally as an employee of Shinra. And he does this motion here, which is very apt because in Japanese, getting fired is kubi ni naru, so you lose your neck. So that made... I haven't actually played the Japanese version, but I'm sure he says something to that effect when he does this. So just a fun little translation note. But yeah, how did you like the Rufus fight? Like, this was probably the most challenging fight for me. Not in terms of maybe losing, but in terms of just getting a little bit frustrated because I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, he had a really good counterattack, like that he kept pulling, and I mean, I give credit where credit's due, even though I feel like the narrative and the characterization of Rufus being in that situation didn't feel right. I think they've made him formidable, which is good. They've retained, and again, it was the same in Remake. He was like the penultimate boss battle or close to being. They made him quite a substantial villain. So yeah, it was cool. Yeah. It was a challenge.
Yeah.
You guys are doing it wrong. You should be playing on easy like I am. It was still a long fight, but like I don't know. I'm not enjoying the long boss fights, so I'm just playing on easy this playthrough.
And again, it's another thread that we've discussed numerous times throughout. It's like for a substantial boss, I can understand them having the 2-3 tiers, the 2-3 iterations that you have to go through to defeat them. But then when you have it with like every boss, and I think in this case with Rufus, it's like it's not just that; it's the fact you've just fought the Turks, and before that you fought a bunch of bandits or whatever, and it's just like battle fatigue.
Yeah. The thing I dislike about difficulty modes and the choice is that I understand their purpose, I understand the need for them, but I love people having sort of shared experiences of having done the same thing in a way, even though games, of course, don't necessarily feature always the same experience compared to like books and movies. But still, it's more communal if everybody's doing the same thing. So you can meet someone and discuss the game and was this difficult, or how did you feel during this part of the game? And we maybe aren't talking about the same thing because we didn't do the same thing. But yeah, of course you can talk specifically about hard mode or normal mode or whatever. But I miss the times when we had just one mode for everyone.
That's nice, Grandpa. Moving on.
Then we pursue Kate Sith in another fun, laborious game of cat and mouse, if you like.
Yeah, and
I'm here all week.
Yeah, and it was not always the most fun thing to do to find him, right? But we managed somehow. But he still manages to take off with the keystone and pass it on to his colleagues. And we feel very betrayed.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Because Cloud had really gone out on a limb to establish how trustworthy Kate Sith was.
Yeah. This is my friend of all friends.
Yes, my most trusted companion. I would be devastated if anything happened to betray this trust.
Yeah,
Cool, Cloud.
yeah. But
Yeah.
thankfully,
And then everyone is sort of mean to him, and it's very sad, and he sort of feels bad. But what's done is done.
yeah, even Aerith forsakes him. But thankfully, we are able to give chase because we are able to track their radio.
Yeah, but crucially, Sid says, I have a shitty old radio. And Vincent says, oh, goody, shitty old radio. I can use this. And he manages to track their helicopter,
Yeah.
which sort of makes it brings it full circle.
Yeah. And this is
fun.
so this is when we start heading not south but north.
Yes,
it's different from the.
we don't go in the direction of Medil, where the Temple of the Ancients used to be, but we go north, and we discover it as Tsang puts the keystone sort of into a pedestal, and the temple sort of just emerges, like sort of magically, and like my headcanon is that these pedestals can be found in the south as well. So you just put the keystone, and the keystone, like, is the keystone actually the temple? Is the keystone expanding and opening up? Because if you stay inside the temple, it sort of gets squished, right?
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I remember in the original game I wondered that, because if I remember rightly, after you come out of the temple at the end and it's just a crater in the ground, right? And then there's just the black materia there, right? In the this thing. So I did wonder whether it was.
Oh yeah, but that's also a great point, because in the original, the temple sort of was the black materia, right?
This is what I'm asking.
Yeah. I think so. So, I think the temple was the black materia, and the only way to take it is to shrink the whole temple down.
I mean, there's a nice full CG cutscene in this game when the sort of temple materializes, and sort of it doesn't really suggest maybe that the ball is expanding and then turning into a thing, but we have these sort of cubes forming up.
Yeah.
But it still could be like the cubes are in the keystone, I guess.
I love that cutscene, by the way. I think the atmospherics, the aesthetic of the Temple of the Ancients, like the entirety of it was just so well done. And I think I mentioned last time when we got inside, it reminded me of like an Escher drawing, Escher painting, like with all these staircases. And it was one of those many locations, like much like with how they were going to iterate Dine or Bugenhagen. Temple of the Ancients was one of those things. Before this game came out, I was like, how are they going to render that? How are they going to visualize it? Because obviously it was so wacky in the original game with all these mad staircases and whatever. So yeah, I really liked it.
But in this version, like Rufus is sort of mobilizing the entire Shinra army and going to this place under the impression that it's the Promised Land, right? And then like Hojo says on the way there, like, by the way, like, this isn't the Promised Land. It's merely a stage, whatever that means. So we have these Shinra soldiers spread out throughout the entire temple, dying quite gruesomely sometimes.
Yeah,
which is different as well.
And I think, again, structurally, and again, atmospherically, structurally and stuff, I loved that the Shinra were there. We had the Cetra sort of symbolism coming into play. We had this looming sense that Sephiroth was about. It really felt like the pace changed here. It felt like we were going towards a climactic, conclusive sort of moment. So yeah, I love the whole thing about it.
Except the parts where it slowed down completely when you're manipulating Aerith and
I remember how much you mentioned that you loved this dungeon. I didn't mind it. I quite liked because I think I said last time what I liked about this dungeon was that it wasn't exclusively battles. I find like a lot of the dungeons we had was like the weighting was like 80 to 20%, like 80% being battles and then 20% puzzling. So for example, the Cosmo Canyon dungeon with Red 13, it was like we were just battling the Gi or whatever. This one, it felt like there was more puzzling elements. It felt more like, for example, the Temples of the Faith back in Final Fantasy X, where there was no fiends to defeat there. It was just the player figuring out how to navigate these environments.
Yeah.
So I was open to it. Again, having said that, I did play through it again this morning, and remembering your prior comment, I was like, this is quite long actually. So, yeah.
So in general, I maybe don't like dungeons that much, and this is sort of a double dungeon because every dungeon features a sort of unique gameplay element. In the Mithril Mines, we have Barrett shooting things, and Red 13 is sort of climbing the walls in Cosmo Canyon. Here we have the rotation thing, and then we have the gathering live stream everything.
Yeah.
So it feels quite long. The only thing that would have made it longer is if you would also have Kate Sith throwing boxes or something.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's a good point, because on top of that, you do still have battles, and you also have the those big square cubes that you have to push around and climb and whatever. So I do take your point. I think there was a lot where perhaps some dungeons are quite singular in what you have to do. So Cloister of Trials, as I've just mentioned, it's like you're doing one thing there. You're trying to open these glyphs or walls or whatever. So yeah, that's a fair point.
To sort of give the Aerith chapters, Aerith parts some due. Like they did sort of tie it into the canonical like fact that she is now communicating better with the planet, and she can sort of manipulate the live stream now when Yuffie sort of talks about it, and it's sort of becoming a bigger part of her character now that she can sort of, this is becoming a bigger part of who she is. So that was, at least they did that to sort of forgive the actual gameplay. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But while all this sort of somewhat slow dungeoning is going around, we have this change setting, of course, where we have Shinra in the building. In the original, it's just Song being stung. And that's a joke from the last time we recorded this. But yeah, so we have a little bit more of a race.
Yeah.
We have the Turks and the Shinra soldiers sort of running around while we also try to navigate the insides of the temple.
Yeah. And I thought that was fantastic, because it's like you can see the Shinra, but you can't reach them necessarily. You know, you've got infantry running around, you've got the Turks, like Reno's back, they're running around. You can't necessarily reach them. When you encounter them and they're in the way, you'll fight them. But the thing I love about this is that the priority is not your conventional enemy. So the priority for the Shinra is not getting Cloud and these guys, and the priority for Cloud is not getting the Shinra. And I was trying to remember a reference, but it reminds me of the hit 1999 film The Mummy, starring Brendan Fraser. It's when they're trying to like escape the catacombs in that film. You've got the bad guys and the good guys, and it's just a funny dynamic, because normally you've just got the good guys and the bad guys trying to kill each other, but they've added this element where actually there's another priority. So yeah, it was just a nicely structured, interesting part of the game, I think.
Yeah. And then there's also this sort of very short moment where they actually team up against the temple.
Yeah.
So we have the Turks and I think it's Cloud and his party sort of killing a monster or something. And then right after that's done, they have to fight each other.
And we talked about this last time, but there's I say that a lot. But there's a sort of Cloud is sort of slowly losing it as we progress through the dungeon, and sort of not culminating in a scene, but there's a scene where after a battle with some soldiers, he chops one in half. Really. He sort of brutally finishes one off. And I mentioned the sort of dissonance between the fact that, you know, what happens in a cutscene and gameplay wise doesn't always match up, because this is just par for the course, really. Like Barrett has a gun and he shoots people all the time, and Cloud chops people to bits all the time. But in this instance, it's sinister and something is wrong.
I mean, well, I think thinking to the scene, I mean, it is kind of in cold blood. The guy is like disarmed on the floor, so there's that. But there is definitely a sort of dissonance in Final Fantasy games when you account for the fact Barrett is shooting people. The first time I ever really thought about that was when they released Advent Children, because Advent Children was the first time we'd really had motion battles that weren't turn-based battles. This was a rendered film, and right at the beginning of the game, I think it's Loz or no Yazoo, whoever has the gun out of the three clones, like kind of tips his motorcycle up and shoots Cloud in the face. and it kind of pings his sunglasses.
Yeah.
And ever since that moment, as a child, I was like, so did he hit the sunglasses, or did Cloud get shot in the face? Like, what happened? yeah, it was just bizarre.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it is, as you say, it's par for the course, and it's just one of those things that you sort of need to accept as a player.
There was another, like we talked about it at the time, when Barrett fights Dine, like two guys standing face to face with guns, just going, like, the visual is sort of silly. It doesn't really make sense.
There's one other moment with Barrett, because I watched the Barrett date. So once the sort of visuals kick in, they're on the Ferris wheel, and the chocobos come running. Barrett like gets startled and is about to blast the chocobos.
No trigger discipline.
Like he's just walking around an amusement park with a gun.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to the temple and Cloud killing someone in cold blood. We get the first instance of this line that is repeated again and again. It's not death, it's a homecoming. Which is sort of Sephiroth speaking through him, sort of indicating or implying that death doesn't really matter because we're all just returning to where we came from. And this sort of gets meaningfully contextualized later by Aerith in the trials. But before we go there, we go somewhere else. No. But back to Barrett and the Turks when they sort of have to fight each other. I mentioned this last time as well. But I just think it's so funny that Barrett and Root get in this fist fight, and Barrett he's angry, but he's not angry enough because Root was directly involved in dropping the plate on Sector 7, which is a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's not something you can brush off, really. So
yeah, it was also in a helicopter shooting at him as he tried to save his friends and his. I know what you mean.
Yeah. But they managed to defeat the Turks, and we have a nice moment with Vincent, sort of saying that death doesn't suit the Turk. So he sort of still has maybe not an alliance with Shinra or the Turks, I don't know, but at least a respect for the institution of the Turks.
That's it, yeah. I think he's still, you get it with people that have been in the Marines and stuff, they sort of have this allegiance, a respect for the core sort of thing. It's almost along those lines, he respects the institution of the Turks. So
I would love to see like a Marine happening upon like Marines who have been shot and like death doesn't suit a Marine. Get up.
Would you love to see that?
I'd love to see that. Like, yeah.
But the Turk connection to Vincent, like, unless you are a player of the original or a fan, like Vincent used to be a Turk. But at this point in the game, if you just played Remake and Rebirth, you have no idea. So it's that's a fun little nod to people in the know, I guess.
Yeah, but we don't need to sort of retread old ground, but it's just another example where it's like, this is a great Final Fantasy VII for new players, and it's like, no, is it? I don't know.
Sometimes. It's like, we did. I wanted. Sorry, I was just remember, like we were talking about last time, that we see the live stream. This is not connected to this. We see the live stream turning people into monsters.
Yes.
And
and we did not get to the bottom of it then.
Yeah, I was like, did we get to the bottom of that? Because I didn't think that was the way monsters became a thing.
Because if I'm not mistaken, we also have in Queen's Blood some talk of the Queen being the origin of monsters in a way.
Yeah.
And the Queen sort of is related to Genova. So is the origin of monsters Genova, or is it the foreign element, or is it live stream?
Because unlike Final Fantasy X, where it's like a really an integral part of the story, while we have fiends and sort of sins manifest and all that stuff, like it's not really discussed.
I'm going to reference what I have read of Traces of Two Paths that Nogvi, you recommended to me, but I remember in that book, in Tifa's section, it's telling her history just prior to the Nibelheim incident, and people are saying to her, "Don't go up the mountain anymore, up Mount Nibel, because there's been a bigger influx of monsters around," right?
Yes.
And that's to do with Mako and the stuff Hojo's been doing. And the live stream is Mako, so there must be some connection there.
Yeah. But we of course also have Genova up at the top.
That also,
In the
probably,
director.
The
Yeah.
plot thickens.
The plot thickens. Let's just keep it thick. It's nice. But yeah, and then we reach a familiar scene with Song being stung.
Yes.
Like, not at the beginning. We actually get to see it. And then Sephiroth says, "It's not death, it's a homecoming." And then we have this touching scene between Song and Aerith, where she says that she never hated him. And he was sort of fond of her as well. We can imagine, at least.
Yeah.
That was a good addition, I think, to have that sort of relationship fleshed out between them. That even though he was her captor, he was sort of the worst. He was the lesser evil, I guess.
Yeah.
And they sort of genuinely do seem to care about each other in a messed up way.
Yeah,
but,
I really like
good.
that. And Sung as well, like just a really well characterized sort of individual. So yeah, the way they fleshed out this scene, I mean, it was potent in the original as well. I really liked it in the original, and I always had a soft spot for Sung. But yeah, the way they layered it and added the Aerith conversation here, I thought that was really, really nice.
Yeah. I love to flesh things out. But yeah, so then we have the trials that they have to undergo to gain access to the stuff there. What are they looking for again? What are they trying to find? Oh, the black materia, yes. Yeah, because we spoke to the Guy Natak, and he was telling us to get the black materia, which we thought was a good idea.
And we said, "Fuck that guy!" As soon as we stepped out.
Yeah. And to do so, we'd have to relive personal traumas for each character. Which, I really like this sequence. Some of them were more potent than others. I personally like the Aerith one, like really upset me. But seeing children in distress just upsets me generally. So the Aerith,
for me.
The Aerith one was very like potent, and I found the Barrett one, where we're sort of seeing him relive the demise of his village and his wife, was pretty messed up too.
Yeah. It was nice to see something new with Barrett. We get to see his wife. We get to see him in Corel before Corel gets burned to the ground. The Aerith thing is basically just traces of two pasts, which was nice to see sort of fleshed out in the game. I like the Red 13 one did not impress me.
I would have liked to have seen something non-Hojo related, because it's really familiar ground. Like, yes, it was shocking, I guess, to see the actual, like, when he was tattooed and all that stuff, but like, I would have maybe liked to seen him, like, how was he caught?
Yeah.
Like, originally or something, like something new.
That would have been
or maybe a scene with his parents or something, just something more novel in a way.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, the Yuffie one, again, I suppose, relating to sort of what Peter just mentioned about Vincent being...
Peter.
Sorry. I'm never going to be able to pronounce it properly. I'm just going to say
it's fine. It's fine. Keep going. Power through.
So what you were saying about the player not being aware that Vincent was a Turk, I think is similar with the Yuffie flashback, because I haven't played Intergrade. I mean, I'm aware of Intergrade. Yeah. I've seen it. Well, there's two things there. I mean, you have the Intergrade, but you also have the Dirge of Cerberus before that. So to play Intergrade, the Dirge of Cerberus knowledge would help as well. But it's like,
it's a 1-2 punch really, because they both reference Intergrade with Sonon. I'm not going to say any more about that, and pull at your heartstrings with that. But then they end the sequence with a character that was teased in Intergrade, but is originally from Dirge of Cerberus. So it's like a very small subset of players that are both familiar with Dirge of Cerberus and Intergrade.
Exactly. It's like...
So it's an interesting move.
And again, just going back to this point of Square saying this is a great game for like new players to discover Final Fantasy VII. It's like Dirge of Cerberus was released in 2005, maybe 2004, something like this.
Yeah.
And then you're showing Nero. It's like, and to my knowledge, there's been no ports or updates or remasters of Dirge of Cerberus, and so unless you're like withered veterans like us, you're not really gonna grasp that. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I like the fact that they are like committing to them. They tease them in Integrate, and they tease them a little bit. Like they showed Wise the Immaculate as well, I think, in some place. So it really is not sort of interacting with the main story at all at this stage, but they are reminding us that it's a thing. So I'm sort of hoping that they will become more impactful.
Yeah, I would love to see more of that as well.
Agreed. That was my biggest takeaway from the Yuffie trial as well. But then after the trials, we get this added context by Aerith when she sort of dismisses Sephiroth's claim that it's a homecoming. So they go through all this sorrow, they go through all this heartbreak, people die, but she says that they can't think of it as a homecoming, that it's not that simple. Death is tragic, it's something that we can't take for granted. And this is sort of an interesting added context, I feel, when we think about the origin of the live stream, or at least the story behind it, where we have Hironobu Sakaguchi losing his mother, right? And sort of conceptualizing the live stream to sort of that being one way for him to deal with her death, deal with losing her, imagining this sort of flowing system that reincarnates things in different ways. But then, of course, it is tragic. It is sadness that we have to work through. We can't just kill people in cold blood like Cloud did.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good sort of conclusion to the trials, even though the trials I feel could have been a bit more impactful themselves. The trials themselves maybe don't drive this point hard enough for me, but the point is good nonetheless.
Yeah.
And then we get access to the inner sanctum, and we get some actually pretty fun.
But before those amazing fun things, for some reason, Cloud's trial comes after they've all undergone their trial, and Cloud's trial just has him relive the death of Biggs and Jesse. And Sephiroth is also there, calling him a puppet, which is nothing new. And tells him, so it's, I don't know why his trial comes later, but I also feel it's a bit cheap that we are retracing familiar ground this much. Like, I would have liked to see a new setting for Cloud's trial or something like that, instead of just, like, this is of course also a question of reusing assets.
Yeah, I think
and it feels a little cheap.
I mean, I suppose in the context, they are reliving like some of their most traumatic moments. I was surprised it wasn't the Nibelheim incident being rehashed again, actually, because I would have assumed that would have been Cloud's most traumatic moment. But yeah, so I think the decision to sew Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse probably shows the extent of the guilt he feels, like survivor's guilt or whatever. So yeah, I'm not sure what else they could have done in terms of tragic moments that happened to Cloud. Maybe if they showed Tifa rejecting him when he was like 5, that might have been
good.
Yeah.
Or like when Tifa got herself in trouble on Mount Nibel and he had to save her. I don't know.
Yeah, like they did Tifa's dad again. Her dad being dead. So
who doesn't have a dad? Fucking boring stuff.
I would have liked to see her mother dying or something like that.
Rephrase that.
No, like just to get something new.
No.
But and then Peter, we get to the fun thing that you were talking about.
Yeah. So we get to see sort of the Cetra show us holograms, really, of their version of their downfall and their rise and what they're all about, I guess. Which is I love to see that sort of stuff. And the more Cetra stuff we get, the happier I am, really, because it was really quite that well was quite dry in the original, which was good and bad, but. Crucially, we see the Cetra personified as sort of cloaked wizards, really, sort of cloaked magic people, and then we have the antagonists, who are the jealous humans, but they are dressed in the same fashion as the actors in the Loveless play, the sort of cloaks and that stuff. So there seems to be some sort of connection there.
And during this
And
sort of,
we also get the Gi as well.
yes, but also during the discussion of the Cetra, they speak of the deceiver that stole the faces of the dead, which is Genova. And this sort of element of Genova is something I feel wasn't really explored very much in the original game. We get it more in the novels, where she sort of specializes in playing dead people, and this seems to have been her way of infiltrating the Cetra, destroying them from within or whatever. But they, of course, are able to not kill her completely, but force her into a deep slumber. So, which is
I think
probably now
that's such an interesting thread of the game that, as you say, is sparsely explored. But when you think about it, it makes a lot of the scenes that we have kind of make sense, or gives them a bit more weight. So, as far as I can remember, I think it's only in the northern village, the Christmassy village in the original game. You can go to.
Sorry, my cat found a paper bag. I'm gonna throw the
and I can hear
throw
it.
the paper bag out.
Every time you're making a good point. Sorry.
Yes, you were saying something
Keep
amazing,
interrupting,
Will.
Will.
It's fine. I don't mind. And I can't remember the point I was making.
Northern Village.
The Northern
something?
Village. So, to my knowledge, the only context for Genova being the shapeshifter and stuff like that, we can access Professor Gast's old recordings and
in Isaac-Lyn.
Thank you. Yes. So we access that, and I think they mention it perhaps there. But with that knowledge, if we think back to the Nibelheim incident and Sephiroth pulling this facade away from Genova, revealing this long silver-haired woman, and it's just fascinating to me because that's when you sort of realize it's like, oh, it's kind of maybe taking the guise of what he would perceive to be his mother, what his mother would look like and stuff. So I was just like, that's so cool. So when you actually account for the fact that Genova can shapeshift and manipulate people that way, and then you think to Sephiroth's relationship to it, it makes it all the more impactful.
It sort of lends credence to the fact that, like, the big antagonists of this game and the original game is Genova, but like I have never thought of it as that, and most people think of it, Sephiroth being the bad guy, but this sort of is giving. I'm enjoying this new. It's not a new take, obviously, but we're getting sort of more context and more info about this mastermind. I guess it reminds me a bit about like Final Fantasy IX did this, but in a much worse way. When you're like the last boss of FF9 is what's his name again?
Necron.
Okay. Yeah. But like we haven't, like, no one mentioned him for 99% of the game. And then all of a sudden, like, he's the climactic actual bad guy.
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah, I think Necron is a very weirdly. I have an episode queued up discussing Necron specifically. I think
subscribe.
Subscribe. Yeah, Necron is a sort of more thematic bad guy because it's like death incarnate sort of thing, and it's dealing with those themes of life and death. But you're right insofar as Kuja is revealed to be more of a sympathetic and misguided sort of villain as the penultimate bad guy. So I think the question remains, and what's being built up, which I think you're maybe alluding to, is there is this debate. It's like, is Genova manipulating Sephiroth or vice versa and stuff? It's an interesting debate. We don't need to go into it here because I think we discussed it before. But more broadly than that, what that's making me wonder is whether are they going to set up Sephiroth as perhaps a more sympathetic villain in the end, in a more overt sense. Because I think even now you can look at what's happened to him, how he was created, and be like, okay, there's a degree of empathy. Like you can understand why he went mad in the first place. But it's like, are they going to take that further? Interesting.
Yeah.
it will be interesting
because
to see.
in the original he never backtracks. Like you can see his tragic origins, but in the end, he's still 100% committed to this new cause. So I'm wondering if he'll sort of all of a sudden have a moment where he sort of sees the error of his ways or something. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, he seems to have a different plan because as he appears in the hall where you see Meteor, he mentions that his plan is to sort of bind these fragmented worlds together. All shall be one again. So it seems to be related to all these multiverse stuff. So, but we don't have the conclusion, so we don't know what he's going to be doing.
Yeah. So cool. So back to the scene. We fight Demon Wall at some point, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And also the Red Dragon.
Cool.
So there are a lot of sort of callbacks to Temple of the Ancients in the original game. Even though there's all this new stuff as well. And then we
we have the scene where Cait Sith heroically sacrifices himself. Because if you take the keystone, the temple will shrink down, and they sort of milk it a bit, which is funny because we've confirmed by now that he's a little robot man, and the doll as well.
I think again, it's another case of, well, for me at least, it's another case where in the original, and much the same here, it's like it does tug the heartstrings a little bit, and despite this betrayal, it's like the power of friendship thing, the self-sacrifice comes to fruition.
Yeah, but again, it's a weird form of sacrifice where you're not losing anything except like money, I guess. You gotta buy a new cat or something.
Yeah, like his sacrifice, it hit harder for me in the original than in this game. Here it is sort of a little bit comedic, or at least like he has this meme where he goes like, "I wish I hadn't skipped leg day."
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Trying to hold up the thing.
But I think again, it's like at the risk of sounding like an old fart, it's like the power of Nobu Uematsu's score writing and the music, because I can still remember it in the original game. All you had was the dialogue on the screen, like the text on the screen, and then Uematsu's score was actually what was carrying the emotion in that moment. So I think that's why it felt all the more potent. So when you have this kind of Scottish cat making leg day memes, it's like, okay, you lose something there.
Yeah, and this scene is also a little bit more about excitement. Are they going to get out of the temple? While in the original we had this scene with Cait Sith doing his strange move. It's like, oh, I wish I had gotten more time with you guys.
Yeah.
It was fun while it lasted. Or some music. And then he gets crushed.
Yeah.
But they make it outside the temple. And who is waiting for them? Sephiroth.
Yeah.
Sephiroth.
Yeah. Good use of Sephiroth here, actually. I think we've mentioned throughout, and I think we had it in Remake as well. It's like he was shown so early and often, particularly in Remake, not so much in this game, but he was shown so much. It was like, okay, is he losing his potency? So this is how Sephiroth is put to best effect, I think, like showing him in these pivotal moments, climactic moments. And as we've discussed last time, I want to stress here, this is actually much better than the recording we lost, I think. So don't feel like you're missing out. But we did mention last time how Cloud in this scene, being confronted by Sephiroth and now with the black materia in play, becomes this weird sort of juvenile, goofy kid. You know, his demeanor completely changes and he actually seems more like a puppet. It's like he's moving in this really goofy way. And I think you were mentioning, Peter, the camera angles. Sorry,
Peter. So they pull out all the stops with this sort of to show us that he is not himself. They sort of change the focal length, so his sort of face feels a bit elongated, and it's sort of it's really unsettling because Cloud is a stoic sort of not emo, but like edgelord character, and he's like, oh, give it, like he's really sort of gone to a sort of childlike state, and I thought that was a really good choice actually, and he ends up giving Sephiroth the black materia, right?
Yeah. As these black whispers are swirling all around, these black whispers seemingly being associated with Sephiroth and Genoa, while the white whispers are maybe associated with the planet and the live stream, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll see. All we know is that the whispers are back. Well, we knew that a while back, but yeah, so they're still around. And then, of course, instead of like beating her senseless,
Oh yeah.
they just end up falling into the abyss. Which was probably a good move in this sort of more realistic setting with these realistic characters. I would not maybe have appreciated Cloud beating her aggressively.
Yeah.
Well, it would have been a really impactful.
Yeah,
scene.
like it would have
Like,
been, in a way,
horrifying.
legendary.
Horrifying.
It would have been
but-
the defining talking point of the game if they.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting that they chose to play it safe there, although it's not surprising. Yes. So, anything else we want to discuss?
Yeah, I think this is sort of the close of the chapter, isn't it? Right.
This is sort of the close to the chapter. So, the most important thing to do now is to head on over to Alleyway Jack's channel, who is almost at 10,000 subscribers. We will not release the next episode,
The final episode.
until the final episode in this amazing series, until Alleyway Jack has 10,000 subscribers. Subscribe for his shower thoughts, subscribe for his views on Final Fantasy and sometimes Tekken when he's being weird. It's going to be amazing. But until next time, caw.
You gotta let him say goodbye.
Oh, let's let him say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Caw.
Cool.